We're talking about words, and we're talking about the power of words this morning when we look at the book of Proverbs, because Proverbs devotes at least probably about 100 verses to our speech. In fact, Proverbs talks about our words and our communication more than just about any other topic in the book. It's something of central importance in navigating life well. So when we think about the ability to navigate life in Proverbs, we're thinking about the ability to use our words in a way that is beneficial to us and to others. Proverbs tells us very straightforwardly, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. Another version says, those who love talking will eat its fruit. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. According to Solomon, the adage, sticks and stones may break our bones, but words can't hurt us, is nowhere near what the reality is. We would like to minimize the impact of words. We would like to even say, well, I don't necessarily care for their language or their words, but ... Solomon and Proverbs comes to us and says, words have the power of life and death, and therefore you cannot separate a person's character from their words. You cannot underemphasize the importance of what a person speaks, because death and life are in the power of the tongue. We all do this, don't we? We all at times in our life try to minimize the power of words. When we say something that we shouldn't say, we say, well, I didn't really. It was just something I said, I didn't really mean it. Didn't mean anything by it. We want to try, when we've said something that we shouldn't have said, we want to try to claw back the power of those words. And even sometimes put it as the other person's problem, right? That our words hurt somebody, and then you say, why are you so hurt? It's just words. But the Proverbs teach us that death and life are the power of the tongue. Words are the primary method for humans to communicate with each other. It's an essential part of what it means to be human, is to be able to communicate in some sense with one another. If you thought about the capacity of words, just a few words to convey so much meaning to other people, one person or to many people. Think about some of the most recognizable statements or phrases that you could put. I'll put them up here on the screen. And these may, depending on your context, depending on when you were raised, depending on what was going on in your world, these sentences or phrases might mean something so profound to you. In just a few words, you get all of this rush of perhaps memory and emotion and inspiration, perhaps even. Phrases like this phrase, when President Reagan said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." You can watch the video of that. Some of you may have watched it when it happened, but when you watch the video of that, first he calls him down there, right? Come down to this wall. Come down to this gate and let's talk. Tear down this wall. There's just 4 words there, but probably brings into your mind a certain image and certain meaning, that 4 words that he was actually, I think, told by his speechwriters, don't say this, right? But he did anyway, and it has meaning to us. How about these 4 words? I have a dream. See, you don't even need, for these sentences or phrases, you don't even need me to put the speaker's name there, right? You already know that we're talking about Martin Luther King Jr., and you think about him making his speech there in Washington, I have a dream. And then you think about the context of that dream, and you think about even his description of the dream. I have a dream where my children will be judged on the basis of their character, not on the color of their skin. And people listened to him speak and said, how could I not share that dream with him? I have a dream. What about Martin Luther? And Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther. in the 1500s, he was standing before, and you may not recognize this off the bat if you're not familiar with that particular time of history, but Martin Luther was brought before this council, and they wanted him to recant all of his writings, the things that he had said. And he believed and argued that he was speaking from the Bible and therefore couldn't recant. And so at the end of his speech before this council, he says, "Here I stand. I can do no other. God help me." And the more that you study his context and the more that you think about what he's saying here, you just see so much meaning captured in so few words. But you see, Proverbs spends little time talking about inspiring speeches, just a few sentences, and more time talking about the power of our everyday words, our everyday conversations, our interactions with people in our own home and people in our own communities. And Solomon says that words are powerful for at least three reasons. First of all, words reveal our heart. Words reveal our heart, who we really are within us. Proverbs 18 verse 4, we're going to have a lot of Proverbs on the slides today, by the way. Proverbs 18 verse 4 says, "The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook." Later in Proverbs 10, or earlier in Proverbs 10 verse 20, "The tongue of the righteous is choice silver." But look at this, "The heart of the wicked is of little worth." So he depicts our words as, in the case of the wise, it's something that's springing up, right? It's this fountain that is a deep water, that the wise, that wisdom is like a babbling brook. It's coming out from this fountain within us. Here, though, he compares the speech of the righteous with the heart of the wicked. He's making a connection between what we say and who we are. More explicitly, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Or to say it like Jesus says it in Luke 6, verse 45, "A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." Now, this is not something that we particularly want to think about, because we would like to judge our character on the basis of our feelings. We would like to judge our character on the basis of our intentions. But Solomon says that we see our character displayed in our words. In our words that we wish we could get back, and we'd like to say, "I'm not that person," right, that said that. "I'm a better person than that." And Solomon says, actually, you're not. Because your words that you said revealed something within you. You don't like it, but it's there. It's not easy to think about our words and how they reveal our heart. But it's more than that, because our words and others' words also affect our heart. In other words, our words come out of our heart, but our heart is also shaped by words. Our heart is shaped by words that pierce us and cut us and hurt our feelings, like in Proverbs 12:18, it describes words like the thrusting of a sword. So Solomon believes that words can really cut deeply. At the same time, he says there's a limit to what bad words can do to a person, right? Like if somebody really dislikes you and they're saying all kinds of bad things about you, he says, like a fluttering sparrow or a darting swallow, an undeserved curse does not come to rest. He says you can learn through wisdom to sort of shake off people's curses at you if they're not founded in reality. It's not that kind of word that has the deepest impact in a person's heart. In other words, it's not somebody directly saying, "I don't like you for this reason," that has the biggest impact in a person's soul, or the way that the person looks at the world. It's those more subtle ways that Satan works on our hearts through words, in ways like gossip. The words of a whisperer are like delicious morsels. We want the details. We want somebody to talk to us about so-and-so. We don't need to know. We have no business knowing, but we really want to know what happened. And he says, here's the problem. They go down into the inner parts of the body. In other words, when you are taking in that material, it's not just coming in one ear and out the other, it's coming down into your heart. And when we hear things said about other people, whether they're true or not, half the time that's really not the difference between whether you should share it or not. We'll talk more about that next week. But when we hear things about other people, it colors the way that we see them, even if what is being shared is not true, even if what is being shared was not ours to hear. It will color the way that we see people, and it will influence our view of them. But even more than that, there will also be times where words that we're listening to constantly through, whether it be through social media, whether it be through some entertainment, whether it be through a friend, whether it be through a podcast, whatever it is, the words that we're taking in shape our value system. They shape our beliefs about what is true and what is false. You've heard it said before that a lie repeated often enough becomes the truth. We're seeing that in our world over and over and over again, and there's been all sorts of experiments that can show as much that if you will just keep telling people something, they're going to start, they might not go the full way, but they're going to start to think differently. And so we have to be aware of the content that we are taking in all the time. A well-spoken word of flattery might also spread a net for our feet, might catch us in our pride. Just consider this careful truth. The words you hear have the power to shape who you are. The words you hear, and maybe we could add, the words you hear and accept into your heart, have the power to shape your soul. But the third thing Solomon is going to get us to see is that words also, they spread rapidly, or they multiply their effect in people's lives. Words are not just something that you throw out there once and it goes away after a few seconds. Words have a lasting impact in people's lives. An evil word or evil words can burn down a city. His speech, this worthless man who plots evil, his speech is like a scorching fire, leaving everything around it burned. At the same time, a good word in Proverbs can bring healing. Like cold water to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country. If somebody is in a place of despair and despondency, and good news is brought to them, it refreshes their soul. There's a gospel application here, right? Good news from a far country. All week long, you and I are going to be encountering people that need some cold water. We're going to be encountering people that are thirsting for more than what they have, and they don't know where to find it, and they don't know how to look for it. And we have the opportunity to bring good news from a far country, from the kingdom of heaven for them. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. This morning, what I'd like to do is talk to you about foolish words. Next week, we'll talk about the words of the wise, and even talk about how to have difficult conversations as a wise person. That's what we're going to talk about next week. But for now, I want to spend just a few minutes talking about foolish words. And many of these things you probably are already aware of as being a problem. The challenge is that the heart is deceitful above everything else, desperately sick, Jeremiah says. And it's so easy for us to see in others problems with words. And it's much harder for us to see those problems in ourselves. It's so easy to think about ourselves as people that bring cold water to a thirsty soul, and other people are like flamethrowers, you know. But if we take a prayerful and honest look at ourselves, remember what we said last week. In the book of Proverbs, you and me, at the end of the day, are the fool. At the end of the day, you and me are the people that can't live out Proverbs in its fullest sense, and therefore are in desperate need of the one who can, which is why we need Jesus. So let's talk about the words of fools with the understanding that either in the past or even now, these words are my words. They're your words. And we must learn through the gospel to work through both who we used to be and also to live out this new reality of who we are in Christ. So the first aspect or the first kind of foolish words that we hear about in Proverbs is dishonest words. Lying is one of the 7 abominations in Proverbs 6:16 through 19. You know, there's 6 things the Lord hates. Actually, there's 7. It's a way of speaking in Proverbs. It doesn't mean there's only 7 things. But lying is frequently mentioned. A man who bears false witness against his neighbor is like a war club or a sword or a sharp arrow. In other words, it is a dangerous thing for someone to bear false testimony about someone else. But you know what? When Proverbs talks about dishonesty, Proverbs also talks about concealing, not just declaring things that are not true. Hiding and covering. When we think about Proverbs and what it says about dishonesty, we read, for instance, in Proverbs 10, verse 6, blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Violence not the only thing. Proverbs talks about being concealed by the dishonest. That there's things that we want to keep under wraps, we want to direct attention away from, and we don't want to be forthcoming about. And so we move from saying, of course I would never lie about, to asking ourselves, what is it that we conceal from each other? What are we trying to maybe even conceal from ourselves? And he says, the mouth of the wicked is the mouth that conceals. Secondly, the foolish words that we read about in Proverbs are words that are quarrelsome or argumentative. Quarrelsome or argumentative. As charcoal to hot embers and wood to fire, so is a quarrelsome man for kindling strife. Now, I want to be careful about not saying more than is necessary. I don't mean to put all of the blame on you or on me in this situation. But if you're living your life and you find that you are always in conflict with someone, and the common denominator is you, or the common denominator is me, in my experience, it might mean that I am like charcoal to hot embers and wood to fire. If the conflict just seems to always be following me, it might be that God is trying to show me that there's a quarrelsome spirit about me. There's an argumentative desire that I have that is leading my life to be one conflict after another, after another, after another. See, I don't like this book of Proverbs very much, do you? I mean, this is not good stuff here. But you see the point. He says, it's like when I was young and we had a fireplace, and I would go in the early morning in the winter, and I would take firewood from right outside the back door in our basement. It was like a cutout basement, but take firewood in there and be amazed in the morning. I put the wood in there on the coals in the furnace from the last night, and in a matter of sometimes just seconds, all of a sudden this wood is on fire and burning. And I didn't have to light a fire. I didn't have to crumble any newspaper. I mean, the coals stayed that hot, right? Well, some of us are walking around like hot coals, right? If we just bump up against something, we're going to start a fire. So we have to be on guard against that. The third thing that Proverbs is going to teach us about foolish speech is that there are words that are simply perverse. And it's important to distinguish what I'm describing here in this case. A perverse speech in Proverbs, or crooked speech, is really saying things that are anti-truth. I don't just mean saying so-and-so did something when they didn't, or something like that. What I mean is, whoever says to the wicked, you are in the right, will be cursed by peoples, abhorred by nations. Solomon is getting us to realize that what we say about what is right and wrong and true and false has ramifications in our life and also in other people's lives. Let's talk about the fourth thing, gossip. I've already mentioned gossip a little while ago. We talked about those delicious morsels, right, that go down within our very being, into our inner being. Here's what Proverbs 11:13 says. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. Gossip is essentially the revealing of secrets. Sometimes they're not true, but oftentimes gossip is based on truth. But it's the revealing of secrets. Did you know what so-and-so said to me? Did you see what they did? The revealing of something that would otherwise have been kept secret. Related to that is slander. Slander is not the revealing of a secret, but is instead just simply defaming someone, coming at them and saying things that are intended to cut them down directly. That verse we just read says that as well, but here's another one. The one who conceals hatred has lying lips, and whoever utters slander is a fool. I don't realize that the same words to cut someone else down will eventually cut themselves down too. Number 6, insults, things that are said intending to hurt people. But here's another one. This is another difficult one. Like a madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, "Oh, I'm only joking." How many of you don't have to raise your hand, how many of you have ever tried to escape having hurt someone's feelings by saying, "Oh, it was just a joke. You thought I meant that? Oh, come on." From your laughter, it's at least not just me, right? So he says, this is somebody throwing arrows, firebrands. Death is the man. He's throwing death, who comes to his neighbor, deceives him and says, "It was all fun and games." Something to think about. Number 7, flattery and bragging. Sorry, I'm trying to move somewhat quickly here because there's so much to say. But flattery and bragging. A lying tongue hates its victims, and a flattering mouth works ruin. The idea that building someone's ego up in such a way that simply flatters them and gets them to feel amazing about who they are, that may not be based in reality and is instead just a way of buttering them up for your own purposes, is destructive. And in particular, in Proverbs, Solomon assigns flattery as one of the main tools of this, the pull into adultery. With her many persuasions, she entices him. With her flattering lips, she seduces him. Of course, you can apply that to both men and women. Lastly, Proverbs talks about foolish speech as being unrestrained. Now, I'll have to restrain myself from saying all I'd like to say about this, but the idea here is when we think about this verse we talked about last week, a fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. The foolish person is always ready to share their opinion about just about anything and is never ready to listen to why their view might be wrong and has supreme confidence about it. I just know ... and they have an answer for everything and they're always ready to share. And Solomon says a wise man quietly holds back his opinions, quietly holds back some of the things that he would like to say because he realizes that he needs to have a filter. Let's talk about a filter this morning as we close. We need a filter for our speech. We've already said we are the fools in Proverbs, and we have in our lives repeatedly had all of those things and the other 4 that we've talked about come forth from our lips. When Jesus was going to the cross, Jesus was led before Pilate and Herod, and he was hearing all of this mockery, and people were beating him, and all of this stuff was happening. And like a sheep before its shearer is silent, so he opened not his mouth. You want to talk about the ultimate restraint. the creator of the universe, the creator of every single person in that crowd, the creator of you and me, openly defiled, mocked, beaten, and taken to the cross, and he didn't say a word. Peter says, it's a little bit small, but Peter says, he committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. He wasn't trying to trick anybody, and when he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judged justly, or judges justly. By his wounds we've been healed, he says, and goes on. Jesus is described in John chapter 1 as the divine Word. The Word who was with God, the Word who was God, the Word who created all things. And when the divine Word came down and dwelt among us, God the Son, carrying a cross up that hill, hearing the mockery that you and I would have given Him, with every right imaginable to rebuke us in rage or worse, and yet He kept walking up that hill. Why? Because Jesus believed that there was power in words. Because on the cross, Jesus could look out at the people reviling Him, and He could say, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And Jesus is the ultimate example to us that life and death are in the power of the tongue. That it was the tongue of other people stirring up the crowd. Crucify him, crucify him. We need to get rid of this guy. And yet it was the words on the lips of Jesus that brought life where death had formerly reigned. And it's the voice of Jesus that's calling you today as well, calling me to follow Him, to leave behind the slinging of death through what we say, and instead to enroll as a disciple in His school of how to talk to other people, how to communicate in a way that brings peace instead of destruction. But it all begins by looking at the one who went through the worst thing that could be gone through, bearing all of our sins, and yet had such control over His speech that the thing that He wanted to say in that moment was, Father, forgive them. Jesus knows every single thing that you've ever said. He knows every single hurt you've ever caused from every single thing you've ever said. I'm guessing if you thought about it, you could find one or two or three or maybe more things that you have said that haunt you, that you wish you could unsay, that you wish you could take back. He knows even the words that you should have said and didn't say and how that haunts you. And on the cross, Jesus took all of that and looked at you and said, I forgive you. And there's no more transformative encounter than to hear the words of Jesus, I forgive you. This morning, if you need to come and follow Christ, you need to be immersed into Christ, follow Him all your life, I want to offer you the invitation to come, to be forgiven as we stand and sing.